After 3 years of war, there's a deal of sorts in Ukraine, although the attacks have not stopped. We've been telling you about Russia's demands and Ukraine's goals. But what about the United States? What does Donald Trump want? First, he wanted access to Ukrainian minerals. Now he wants to buy Ukraine's nuclear power plants. Tonight, we'll decode his motives behind playing mediator. Meanwhile, Europe, that is talking big about supporting Ukraine, has failed to agree on a $5 billion military aid package that Kiev said that it urgently needed. Also, a report on how China is watching all of this closely and may use it to shape its own strategy on Taiwan. A new video shows how Beijing is preparing for a potential invasion. Why Turkey is protesting against President Erdogan, how a power outage at the Heathrow airport has disrupted global travel. While leaders in Israel say that the country is witnessing a civil war, how the Indian judiciary is under the scanner after a cash bust and a transfer. Why Indonesians are furious about a change to the country's military law. Why India needs a homegrown web browser. And what is the big crunch? How will it spell the end of our universe? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Is Elon Musk going to receive a top-secret briefing on China? US President Donald Trump says no. Reports claim that Musk is set to be briefed on US strategy in a potential war with China. But Trump has dismissed the speculation, calling it fake news. Musk has labelled it pure propaganda. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Bangladesh's Mohammad Yunus unlikely to have a formal meeting at the BIMSTEC summit. Dhaka has requested for a meeting on the sidelines of the summit, which will be held in Thailand next month. This will be the first multilateral event where both Prime Minister Modi and Mohammad Yunus will be in attendance. The Sudanese army recaptures the presidential palace in central Khartoum. This is a major blow for its rival, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, who responded to the takeover with a deadly drone strike. Since April 2023, the presidential palace has been a stronghold of the RSF. Russia's central bank keeps its key rate at 21%. This comes as Moscow battles rampant inflation. Last October, the bank had raised the rate to 21%, its highest level since the early 2000s. Prices have been rising across the Russian economy, driven by government spending on the war in Ukraine and labor shortages. And a volcano erupts in Indonesia, cancelling many flights from the resort island of Bali. Thousands have also been evacuated. The volcanic ash has blanketed several villages. The local government has declared a 14-day emergency. In negotiations, clarity is important. Both sides should know what they want. And in Ukraine, they sort of do. Russia wants to turn Ukraine into a broken state. Ukraine wants to beat back the Russians. Broadly, this is where they stand. But equally important is a middleman or the broker. What is their motive? In this case, the broker is the US President, Donald Trump. He is bringing Ukraine and Russia to the talking table, but no one knows what he wants. What is his plan for Ukraine? All that he's repeatedly said is this.
Hopefully we could save thousands of people a week from dying. That's what it's all about. They're dying. It's really humanity. We're talking about humanity. We're not talking about the money. We're losing 2,000 human beings every week. More than that, actually. 2,000 nice, young. I've seen the pictures, I've seen the satellite photos and lots of other photos, and it's a horrible thing that's happening. Thousands of people are dying a week.
Trump used to own the Miss Universe competition, and that's a remark straight out of it. I want to end the war and suffering. Well, everybody wants that. The question is, how is Trump achieving it? His plan appears to have two parts. Part one is to recoup the money from Ukraine, the aid money from Ukraine, and second is to push for a ceasefire. The first part is going to plan. President Zelensky has agreed to sign the minerals deal. He will share Ukraine's resources with the US. Trump says the deal will be signed shortly.
One of the things we are doing is signing a deal very shortly with respect to rare earths with Ukraine, which they have tremendous value in rare earth, and we appreciate that.
The US president wants to go further. This week he floated a new idea. What if the US took over Ukraine's nuclear power plants, basically bought them off Kiev? Zelensky rejected the idea yesterday. He said he's open to American investments, but he's not open to selling Ukrainian power plants.
All nuclear power plants belong to the people of Ukraine. President Trump asked me what I thought about the plant. I told him that if it is not Ukrainian, it will not operate for anyone else. It is illegal. We can't just dispose of this plant because it's state-owned.
That's what Zelensky said about the mineral deal too. He said he would not sell his country, but weeks later he's doing exactly that. So who knows, maybe Zelensky will change his position again. Either way, that is part one of Trump's plan to make money out of Ukraine. And there is no ambiguity about it. The second part, though, is full of ambiguity. No proposals, no terms, no demands, and no deadlines. It's all very vague at the moment. And this partial ceasefire is a classic example of that. Russia says Ukraine has already broken it. On Wednesday, Kiev struck an oil depot in Russia, in the region of Krasnodar. Moscow says that attack violated the ceasefire. Meanwhile, Russia too is escalating. They launched a barrage of drones at Ukraine's Odessa city. Take a look at this. So the Trump truce is teetering because it wasn't based on trust or concessions. It was the product of Trump's conviction. That may be enough to bring both sides to the table, maybe even for a partial truce. But it's not enough for peace. For that, you need a concrete plan with different steps and timelines. Just look at the Gaza deal. First step was releasing hostages. The second was a permanent ceasefire. The third was rebuilding. That was the plan. The reason it failed was not the lack of a roadmap. It failed because there was no political will to impose it. Why doesn't Trump have such a plan for Ukraine? To understand that, we must look at the motive. Why does Trump want peace? He loves to flaunt his anti-war credentials, but some of his ex-allies say he's not interested in peace. He is interested in what comes with it, possibly a Nobel Peace Prize. I know it sounds too ridiculous to be true, but Trump's own officials have talked about it, like National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Listen to what he said in February.
By the end of this all, we're going to have the Nobel Peace Prize sitting next to the name of Donald J. Trump. And who opposes peace? How do the Democrats oppose?
Personal ambition could be one reason. Another is strategy. Trump doesn't see Russia as America's chief rival. That would be China. In his first term as president, he accelerated America's pivot to the Indo-Pacific. Even now, his top officials are China hawks. And where does Russia come in? Russia and China have deepened their ties in the last decade. They now have what they call a no-limits partnership. And Trump wants to break this up. He wants to drive a wedge between China and Russia. Listen to what he said this week.
As a student of history, which I am, and I've watched it all, the first thing you learn is you don't want Russia and China to get together. They're probably friendly now, but we're going to be friendly with both.
Experts are calling it the reverse Nixon. I'll explain why. In the 1970s, the US broke up the partnership between China and the Soviet Union. Richard Nixon was US president back then. He reached out to China and he split them up. Trump is doing the reverse. He is reaching out to Russia instead of China. Different approach, same goal. Is that why Trump is desperately pushing for peace in Ukraine to make inroads in Moscow? Well, at this point, we can only speculate. But what's clear is that Trump does not have a concrete plan. Perhaps he wants the flexibility to work things out, or his team is genuinely clueless. Either way, we'll be tracking his moves closely. This year, the Ukraine war has taken a decisive turn, not on the battlefield, but in the diplomatic corridors of Washington, D.C. Until last year, the US was Ukraine's #1 backer, but this year they have stepped back. Their military aid has slowed to a trickle. Instead, Washington is engaging with Russia. It is pushing for a peace deal. All of this did not really come as a surprise, but it was a big setback for Ukraine. And it had ramifications far beyond Kiev. Because for decades, the West was a unified bloc, a bloc led by the United States of America. But Trump's America wants out. And this has split the West into two parts. On one side is the United States turning inward. On the other side are the rest, the allies left behind by American policy. So these countries are now huddling together. They're building what they call the coalition of the willing, those willing to help Ukraine.
We'll be holding the Coalition of the Willing Summit next Thursday in Paris in the presence of President Zelensky. And we're finalizing our work on short-term support for the Ukrainian army, on defending a sustainable model for the Ukrainian army to prevent Russian invasions, and on the security guarantees that European armies can provide.
First, it was the UK and the European Union, and now Canada has joined the ranks. They have a new Prime Minister, Mike Carney. He was in Europe this week. He arrived in Paris for his first foreign visit, and the visit itself was a statement because Canada had chosen Europe over the US for the Prime Minister's first visit. Canada is also seeking defense ties with the EU. This includes building European jets and also other military equipment. Canadian manufacturers will get more contracts and Ottawa will be less dependent on the US. At least that is the plan. So America's traditional allies are coming together, the likes of Europe, Canada and the UK. The onus is on them to continue the fight. But the question is, can they sustain it? Can they keep supporting Ukraine without American support? I ask because look at what happened on Thursday. The EU leaders hosted a summit in Brussels. The focus was on Ukraine, on how they can help the country, on how they can help Ukraine. The European Union, as you would know, has 27 member states. Most of them agreed on one thing. They agreed that Ukraine needs military aid. But when it came to signing the checks, there was no consensus. Ukraine had asked for 5 billion euros, which is around 5.4 billion US dollars. This money was to buy ammunition. President Zelensky has made this plea personally at the EU summit.
Crucial that your support for Ukraine does not decrease, but instead continues and grows. And this is especially true for air defense, military aid, and our overall resilience. We need funds for artillery shells and would really appreciate Europe's support with at least 5 billion euros as soon as possible.
Zelensky says it's urgent, yet Europe could not agree on it. And the main reason was two countries, France and Italy, which is strange because French President Emmanuel Macron has been so vocal about European support, about taking its security into its own hands. Yet his government is reluctant, especially to commit to financial resources. France says it is committed to the cause, But their first priority is a different package. A $19 billion G7 loan to Kiev. So loan, not aid. That is what France is prioritizing. And then we have Italy. They have a different issue. They're asking for more technical details. And all of this has delayed the aid package. And it shows that Europe remains stuck in the same cycle. They make ambitious declarations, which is followed by infighting, and which ends with a watered-down compromise, one that pleases no one. Also, this sort of indecisiveness is not new. Since the war began in 2022, Europe has promised over $50 billion in aid, but this support has been slow to come. And even when there is money, the deliveries take forever. Defense contractors take years to fulfill orders, and Ukraine needs the ammunition now. On the other hand, the US had been using a system called drawdown. It allows weapons to be sent directly from American military stockpiles to Kiev. So it's much quicker. But you see, Europe does not have such stockpiles. So sending weapons is a calculated gamble. Who do they prioritize, their own armies or Ukraine's? That is the question that has been plaguing them. So Europe's leaders may talk about standing by Kiev, but their actions clearly fall short. They can't agree on a $5 billion ammunition package. $5 billion. How can they fill the US void? Can Europe sustain Ukraine's defense? If the latest summit is any indicator, the answer is a hesitant and awkward maybe. China too is watching Ukraine. Even though this conflict is far from the Indo-Pacific, Beijing is tracking every development closely. Because the Ukraine war is like a live case study for the Chinese, a lesson of sorts on modern warfare, and an understanding of how the world responds to aggression. How this conflict pans out could shape China's own decision on Taiwan. In fact, some signs are already emerging. China has begun laying the groundwork for a potential invasion of Taiwan. Let me show you a video that emerged recently from China. It was shot at a beach in southern China. There were some large ships there. They looked unusual. Take a look at these pictures. This is what they look like. The ships were elevated. They were above the water. They were interconnected by long ramps. And one of the ramps stretches out to the stand. Now, this video was doing the rounds on Chinese social media, then suddenly it disappeared, leaving behind questions and a lot of speculation. Questions like, what are these ships? Experts say they're a new class of Chinese landing barges. And what is their purpose? They are designed for an invasion of Taiwan. If there is an attack, these barges will act like floating bridges. They can be stationed just off the coast, and from there the PLA can lower the ramps. They can deploy military assets directly onto Taiwan's roads. These vessels will significantly expand the PLA's options. They could enable landings from multiple points. Now, here is a report. With these vessels, the PLA could land on any road within 150 meters of Taiwan shores. So China is strengthening its army, the People's Liberation Army. It wants a military which is war-ready. And with that target in mind, Beijing has undertaken one of the biggest military build-ups. This is under the direct orders of Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, who has overhauled the command structure, boosted missile and nuclear stockpiles, and strengthened the paramilitary. This includes the Chinese Coast Guard as well as the maritime militia. They're all conducting joint operations. These developments have all made Taiwan nervous. Taipei has released an assessment of its own. Remember, Xi Jinping had set a deadline for 2027 for a potential invasion. Taiwan believes that he will stick to this deadline because it matches another timeline, the modernization of the Chinese army. Xi Jinping wants to do it by 2027. And by the looks of it, his army is chasing that target furiously. Meanwhile, China is also expanding its influence campaign in Taiwan through other means.
Over the past period, China has taken advantage of the freedom and diversity of democratic Taiwan to absorb crime groups, media personality, political parties, and even retired military and police, carrying out activities such as division, destruction, and subversion from within us. Recently, China tried to lure our people by widely issuing Chinese passports, allowing our people to apply for Chinese residency permits and identity cards as an attempt to confuse the national identity of the Taiwanese people.
So Taiwan has no choice but to prepare. It is holding a military drill. This is their largest military exercise. It's an annual affair, usually for 5 days, but this time they will hold it for 10 days. So they have doubled the time. And China has taken note. It has also sent a message in the form of 59 military aircraft and several warships near the island. China is using military force to threaten Taiwan. It says this is punishment for promoting independence. Taipei has released a video too. Take a look. Those were Chinese vessels. They were spotted near Taiwan's coast. It is a clear pressure tactic. Beijing is drawing inspiration from Ukraine, particularly from the Western response. If they remain a house divided, the Western players, if they fail to act decisively, then China may be emboldened to become more aggressive and to launch an invasion of Taiwan. Now let's turn our attention to Turkey. Thousands of people are protesting there over the arrest of Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul and the main rival of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. İmamoğlu was arrested on Wednesday morning in a pre-dawn raid, and this sparked off a political storm. Thousands of people took to the streets protesting against the arrest. We'll see a lot of young people among the protesters. They are the ones leading the charge, defying a nationwide ban on public gatherings. They were marching through the streets, chanting slogans and warning people that their rights are being taken away. Many of the protesters are party agnostic. Some don't even support İmamoğlu personally, but they're fighting against what they see as Erdogan's authoritarianism.
His help to students is known by many. Let's say we forget all that, and we don't like İmamoğlu. I don't like İmamoğlu very much, but I am here against this injustice. My friends are here too. Our friends from all parties and views are here right now. We came here to defend the law, not İmamoğlu.
And it's not just young people hitting the streets. There are plenty of older Turks as well, people who remember past instances of authoritarian rule in Turkey. They too have a message for Erdogan.
I am 69 years old and have 3 children. I want my 3 children to live in a beautiful country, work in a beautiful Turkey, because this government must now understand that with fear you cannot prevent the inevitable.
This public anger was sparked by the arrest of Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul. Turkish authorities say that İmamoğlu was corrupt and that He also aided terrorists. But the people protesting do not buy this. They think it's a ploy orchestrated by President Erdogan. The protesters think that he wants his main rival out of the way before he makes another bid for Turkey's presidency. You see, Imamoglu was supposed to declare his presidential candidacy this weekend. He was going to throw his hat in the ring and challenge Erdogan head-on. According to some polls, Imamoglu was becoming more popular than Erdogan. Turkey's opposition thinks that he is their best bet, their best shot at ousting Erdogan and ending his more than 2-decade-long reign. Imamoglu also has a history of thwarting Erdogan. Starting from way back in 2019, that is the year when Imamoglu became the mayor of Istanbul twice. First, he won the election in April 2019. And what did Erdogan do? He annulled that election. He called for a fresh one a few months later, and Imamoglu won that second election as well, forcing Erdogan and his party to concede. So Imamoglu served out his first term in full. Then in 2014, a third election was held, and he won again. This is despite a slew of legal challenges against him. He was sentenced to prison in 2022 for calling some people fools. Yes, for that, for calling people fools. But he filed an appeal, and that case is still on. If Imamoglu loses this case in court, he could be barred from politics, which would be very convenient for Erdogan. In fact, the president had another stroke of luck earlier this week. It came from Imamoglu's university. They decided to cancel his diploma 31 years after it was issued, apparently because of a technicality. This could bar Imamoglu from standing for president because that is a prerequisite to contest. You must be a university graduate. Again, how convenient for Erdogan. Then on Wednesday, the most convenient things of all happened. Imamoglu gets arrested for corruption and for helping terrorists. It seems Erdogan just keeps finding ways to get lucky, so you can understand why people are angry. But the Turkish president has dismissed all of this. He's dismissed the thousands of people on the streets. Instead, he says the opposition party is engaging in theatrics.
I am saying it again from here. The CHP's internal issues are not the concern of the country and the people, but of a handful of ambitious people at its own headquarters. Us personally, as a party or alliance, have no time to waste on the opposition's theatrics.
Erdogan has his supporters. Some people believe that Imamoglu should be investigated. Others think that the whole presidency debate is premature because elections are scheduled for 2028, which is 3 years from now. And technically, Erdogan cannot even run because there's a term limit. A Turkish president can hold office for only 2 terms. That sounds like a solid argument until you remember that Erdogan has been in power for 22 years. He was first prime minister, then he amended Turkey's constitution to become an all-powerful president, and then he reset his term limits. Why do you think he won't do it again? His party is already talking about it. Erdogan has remained in power for 22 years. He shows no signs of stepping aside. And he's willing to rewrite the rules to stay in control. That is why the Turkish people are angry. They've seen this play out for over 2 decades, and they know exactly what Erdogan is up to.
ऑनरेबल जस्टिस यशवंत वर्मा जी के ऊपर ये लगा है चार्ज। उनके घर से मिला है कैश और काफ़ी बड़ी मात्रा में मिला है। ये ऐसा पता चला है जो मीडिया की खबरों से हमें पता चला है। हमें अपनी व्यक्तिगत जानकारी नहीं है, लेकिन मीडिया की खबरों से यही हमें जानकारी है। बार इसमें उनको किसी कीमत यहाँ एक्सेप्ट नहीं करेगा, ये बार का अपना फैसला है और यही इसी पे हम लोग निर्णय ले रहे हैं। 24 तारीख को 1 बजे जनरल हाउस बुला करके, और उसमें बाकी साथी हमारी कार्यकारिणी ने तो ये डिसाइड कर लिया है, लेकिन हम पूरे अपने जनरल हाउस बुला करके बाकी अधिवक्ता साथियों के साथ, जो इलाहाबाद हाईकोर्ट के बाकी अधिवक्ता साथी हैं, उनसे हम लोग बातचीत करेंगे और हम लोग एक निर्णय लेंगे और इस पर हम लोग एक बड़े आंदोलन के लिए तैयार होने जा रहे हैं।
So more and more questions now emerging from top lawyers across the country, including Harish Salve. He's also spoken out against the in-house investigation that has been ordered by the Supreme Court, as well as the transfer of Justice Yashwant Verma from the Delhi High Court to the Allahabad High Court. He was speaking to CNN News 18's Rahul Shivshankar. This is what he had to say.
On a day full of implications, really, for judicial transparency, Mr. Salve, your assessment of the response of the Supreme Court collegium in the first instance?
My response is, I'm afraid to say, very negative. And it's for a reason. The allegations, and I only call them allegations, I have no information beyond what I have read in the newspaper. So I caveat it. But if the allegations are true, and the fact that the Supreme Court has considered it necessary to act, then what should have been the response? And the response has established things which critics of the collegium system like me have always said, that this system doesn't work. Today, this is not a case where there are some internal complaints against the working of a judge, and in order to ensure that judicial independence and integrity is not compromised, you do an in-house inquiry. Today, this complaint is that, as per the newspapers, the fire brigade and the police went into the judge's home to rescue it from a fire and found large sums of cash. Now, if this is true, it's something which has happened in public. And I have 2 or 3 reasons for which I feel this collegium decision is deeply flawed. If this had been found, Rahul, in your house, if such a large money would have been found in your house, by now the ED would have been at your doorstep. If this money had been found at the house of the Home Secretary, Finance Secretary, Transport Secretary, would they have been transferred to another department? They would have been suspended and a disciplinary inquiry commenced. Perish the thought, if this had been found in the home of a cabinet minister or a state minister, what would have happened? People would have been paying for their blood. You would have been asking right now, why has he not been arrested? And if the government had said, we will do an in-house inquiry into the cabinet minister, the Supreme Court would have interfered on a PIL, constituted an SIT and a supervised investigation. Are those same standards to be applied to one of your own? I would say higher standards need to be applied to one of your own. So it's wrong at that level. It's wrong at a second level because this is...
Now let's talk about a travel crisis that no one saw coming. The Heathrow airport in London is closed today because it has no power. A fire knocked out the airport's main electricity supply as well as a backup system. Heathrow is not just another airport, it is Europe's biggest aviation hub. 80 airlines operate out of this airport, so the disruption has caused chaos worldwide. More than 1,000 flights have been hit. There have been mass cancellations. Many passengers around Europe are stranded. They're waiting to hear when they can get a flight. And airlines are scrambling to manage the chaos. Our next report has the details.
This is the fire that shut down the Heathrow and sparked chaos across the globe. The Heathrow is Europe's biggest airport and one of the busiest travel hubs in the world. It has now been paralyzed. This is Terminal 4 at the Heathrow Airport. Usually it's packed with passengers, but now security officials outside are turning them away. The car parks look deserted. Inside, the airport is in darkness, with people using the flashlights of their phones to navigate stairwells. it may be days before power is fully restored. But how exactly did this happen?
That's a biggie.
The cause of the blaze remains unknown, but it was massive. It took out not just the substation, but the backup system as well. Heathrow wasn't the only one dependent on this power source. Around 5,000 homes nearby were connected to the same system. They too were without power until this afternoon. For now, authorities don't suspect any foul play.
I'm entirely, and my team and we're all here on site are entirely focused on getting supplies back as soon as we physically possibly can. I don't want to mismanage any expectations, so I won't give a firmer timeline, but we are really, really focused and have options that are being actively worked on as I speak to you now.
But the disruption has sent ripples across global aviation. Around 80 airlines operate out of Heathrow. The disruption has impacted thousands of flyers. Multiple flights have been cancelled. Over 1,300 flights were impacted just today. Nearly 37 flights from India alone have been disrupted. Incoming flights have been diverted to other nearby airports. Airlines have asked passengers to check the status of their flights before they leave their homes. But across different airports of Europe, many passengers have been left stranded.
But as soon as possible. But if we don't get one today, should we assume that we'll get one tomorrow?
Tomorrow, after tomorrow.
So you don't know?
Because we book the hotel for when we go right now. Like we book it for one night and just wait for their email. We can do.
And if we don't get communication, then what?
Only by email or message.
Okay.
So they might text.
It's a stressful time for thousands of passengers because no one can say for sure when the Heathrow would start operating again. So what can you do as a passenger if your flight has been disrupted? Make sure you check the airline's website. Most of them are rebooking flights free of charge. If you can't get one, you're entitled to a refund or compensation. Stranded passengers are eligible for accommodation and food as well as reimbursements for transportation. But some passengers might not have these protections. This includes those flying from outside Europe or using non-British or non-European airlines. If you're planning a trip to Europe and haven't booked yet, it's best to delay your plans because now may not be the ideal time to fly.
Israel is back in Gaza. It has resumed its ground operations, and this time Israeli troops are not just fighting, they're also seizing land in Gaza. The plan apparently is to evacuate the population in the south, seize more areas and expand security zones. Israel's defense minister has also issued a warning. It's a message to Hamas. If they don't let the hostages go, Israel will continue to take more and more territory. They will permanently control parts of Gaza. So the war has resumed with full force.
Next to Gaza, I can tell you that Israel is intensifying the fight against Hamas. The IDF has renewed targeted ground operations, securing key areas up to the center of the Netzarim axis. Our forces now control central and southern Gaza, expanding the security zone and creating a partial buffer between north and south.
But this isn't the only battle that Israel is fighting. It is also at war with itself. Yesterday, hundreds descended on the streets of Jerusalem. They had only one demand. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu must go. Protests against the government began on Tuesday. That's when the ceasefire fell through. But yesterday, there was a new catalyst, the firing of Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar. Shin Bet is Israel's internal security agency. like the FBI in the United States or the MI5 in the UK or the Intelligence Bureau in India. Shin Bet is responsible for counter-terrorism, intelligence gathering and internal security, all within Israel. In 2021, Ronen Bar was appointed for a 5-year term. But now Prime Minister Netanyahu has fired him. The official reason is a breakdown of trust. The actual one may be far more complicated. You see, this is the first time an Israeli government has fired the head of Shin Bet. The decision has left the country stunned, and the reason seems to be an investigation. It began last month. Shin Bet was tasked with investigating Netanyahu's office, specifically officials in his team, over financial ties with Qatar. The charge was that these officials had financial ties with Qatar. Netanyahu's Likud party has denied all allegations, but the intelligence agency was still digging, and overseeing that investigation was Ronen Bar himself. His involvement rattled the Prime Minister's inner circle, and now he's out.
The demonstration is about the dismissal of the head of the Shin Bet, a dismissal that is ultimately a pretty clear conflict of interest. Someone who is actually being investigated cannot fire their investigator, and that is exactly what is happening right now.
Ronen Bar calls this a politically motivated move. And in good news for him, Israel's Supreme Court has frozen his termination. It wants to review appeals against this dismissal. But it's not just Shin Bet that Netanyahu is targeting. His other target is Israel's Attorney General, Gali Baharav Miara. She was the one who ordered this investigation, so the government is going after her too. This Sunday, the cabinet will debate a no-confidence motion against her.
There are actually two pillars of Israeli democracy left at the moment, which are the Attorney General and the head of the Shin Bet. The police have already fallen, and the attack on the courts and the gatekeepers is completely brutal. We are here to stand. We will not let the state fall. It is very important for us to safeguard it because Israel cannot exist if it is not democratic, liberal, free, and Jewish.
So first it was the judiciary, now it is the intelligence agencies, and next it will be the Attorney General. Protesters fear that this is not just about the Gaza war, this is about power, and Netanyahu is trying to cling to it. They accuse the Prime Minister of eroding Israel's democratic institutions. The opposition too is rallying against him. So are former judicial leaders. They're calling it a civil war. In fact, Israel's current president has also expressed concern. He says Netanyahu's actions are creating deep rifts.
It is impossible not to be deeply troubled by the harsh reality unfolding before our eyes. Thousands of reserve duty call-ups have recently been issued, and it is inconceivable to send our sons to the front while simultaneously advancing divisive and controversial initiatives that create deep rifts within our nation. It is unthinkable to resume fighting while still pursuing the sacred mission of bringing our hostages.
Netanyahu and his allies dismiss the criticism. They say it's just political bias. They accuse the Supreme Court and Shin Bet of being part of an entrenched elite, one that's working against the will of the people. So what happens next? In Gaza, Israel has a clear goal: end Hamas and bring back the hostages, and it can use brute force to try to achieve both. But what will it do on the streets of Jerusalem, where protesters are demanding change and leaders are warning of a civil war? It looks like Netanyahu is battling both Hamas and his own people. How do you surf the internet? If you're an Apple user, likely on Safari. If you're an Android, maybe Google Chrome. Both are American web browsers. Where are the Indian ones, or the Japanese ones, or the European ones? It seems the government of India is also asking this question. New Delhi is pushing for homegrown web browsers. In August 2023, the IT ministry launched a challenge. You had to create your own web browser. Indian developers were free to sign up and participate. They had to design and submit their product, and yesterday was judgment time. Zoho Corporation's ULAA bagged the first prize. They got 1 crore rupees in prize money, which is around 116,000 US dollars. The Ping browser got the second place, and Team Ajna's Bharat Web Navigator finished third. And all these products had to fulfill certain criteria. They had to work across different platforms. They had to support all official Indian languages, and they had to have parental filters. More than 430 teams registered for this challenge, and Zoho came out on top. But I know what you're thinking. My Safari and Chrome work perfectly fine, so why do I need an Indian web browser? Let's try to answer this question. A web browser is your window to the internet. You use it to surf the web, to access your email inbox, to use your social media accounts, and to make online transactions. So web browsers have access to a lot of important information about you. But where is this information stored? And under whose jurisdiction? Just look at the market split. Google Chrome has 67% of the browser market, 67%. Safari has 18.3%, and Microsoft Edge has more than 5%. That's 3 American companies with 88% of the market share. Imagine the scale of domination. Where do you think these companies store their data? In the United States of America. And why just these companies? The US has 45% of all data centers in the world, so most of our data is under US jurisdiction. The companies will say that they are multinational, that they will protect your data, but if Uncle Sam puts his foot down, they will comply. Enter homegrown alternatives. Your data can be stored within Indian borders. It gives us more control and safety. That's one key reason to build your own browser. Secondly, compatibility. India has dozens of languages. We also have our own sensitivities and priorities, so an Indian product could offer a better fit. And finally, digital sovereignty. This is very important. Imagine India and the US have a falling out tomorrow. Washington asks Google to deactivate Chrome in India. What will Indian users do? Should we stop surfing the internet? Obviously not. We should have our own web browser. So the logic for such a move is sound. But it won't be easy to implement. For starters, these are monopolistic companies. Your iPhone comes installed with Safari, your Windows laptop comes with Microsoft Edge, your Android phone comes with Chrome. Are you going to take the time out to install an Indian browser? If the quality is great, maybe. Which brings us to the second challenge. Google and Apple are multi-trillion-dollar companies. They have access to the best designers, the best coders, and the best marketers. Can Indian startups compete with them? I ask because even the likes of China have found it tough. As you know, China builds alternatives for everything. They have banned your WhatsApp and YouTube. Instead, they have Weibo and Tencent. Yet Google Chrome is the most used browser in China, so this mission is not going to be easy for India. But that's no reason to give up. They say data will be the new oil, which means tech companies could be the new superpowers and tech products could be the new weapons. It is only logical to build your own. We have all heard of the Big Bang. It's how our universe was born. But have you heard of the Big Crunch? Some scientists believe that it is how our universe will end. Our galaxies, planets, space, time, all crumpling back together, almost like a cosmic rewind. But what will cause this Big Crunch? When will it happen? Should you be worried? Can you still make it to your weekend brunch? Our next report tells you.
Remember that time you blew up a balloon way too much and it popped? Now imagine the universe is that balloon. Except instead of popping, it just kind of collapses, almost like a deflating souffle. That's one way the universe might end, and it's being called the Big Crunch. So let's break it down. Around 13.8 billion years ago, the universe was born in an enormous explosion. It was called the Big Bang. After the Big Bang, the universe started stretching out like a rubber band, and it didn't stop. It kept expanding, getting bigger and bigger. pushing galaxies, stars, and planets farther apart. For a long time, scientists thought that gravity would eventually put a stop to this expansion. But in 1998, astronomers discovered something new. The universe wasn't just expanding, it was expanding faster and faster. It was as if the universe had chugged a giant energy drink and just wouldn't slow down. So, who was the culprit? It was a mysterious, invisible force called dark energy. Now, dark energy is the universe's version of a magic trick. It's there, but nobody knows exactly how it works. Scientists used to think it was a constant force, like the universe's personal turbo boost. But now, new research suggests otherwise. It says dark energy might be getting weaker over time. And that's where things get interesting. If dark energy loses its grip, then the universe's original tough guy might make a comeback. That is, gravity. And if gravity is more overwhelming, the whole universe might stop expanding and start shrinking, aka the Big Crunch. What will it look like? Imagine playing your favorite movie, but in reverse. Galaxies will start zooming back towards each other. Planets will collide. Stars will crash into each other, turning the whole sky into a cosmic demolition derby. Eventually, everything smashes together into one enormous, ultra-hot, ultra-dense blob. Space-time itself gets crumpled up, and then the universe as we know it ceases to exist. It's all gone in a poof. But when will this happen? Well, you won't need to cancel your weekend plans. If the big crunch happens, it's probably trillions of years away, maybe even longer. Scientists are still figuring that part out. Also, the big crunch is one of the many ways the universe might end. It's still just a theory, and there are many more. The important thing is that the universe might not last forever. But until then, enjoy the ride. The universe is still here, and that means you still have time to complete all your pending tasks. But if the cosmos can take...
ऑनरेबल जस्टिस यशवंत वर्मा जी के ऊपर ये लगा है चार्ज। उनके घर से मिला है कैश और काफ़ी बड़ी मात्रा में मिला है। ये ऐसा पता चला है जो मीडिया की खबरों से हमें पता चला है। हमें अपनी व्यक्तिगत जानकारी नहीं है, लेकिन मीडिया की खबरों से यही हमें जानकारी है। बार इसमें उनको किसी कीमत यहाँ एक्सेप्ट नहीं करेगा, ये बार का अपना फैसला है और यही इसी पे हम लोग निर्णय ले रहे हैं। 24 तारीख को 1 बजे जनरल हाउस बुला करके, और उसमें बाकी साथी हमारी कार्यकारिणी ने तो डिसाइड कर लिया है, लेकिन हम पूरे अपने जनरल हाउस बुला करके बाकी अधिवक्ता साथियों के साथ, जो इलाहाबाद हाईकोर्ट के बाकी अधिवक्ता साथी हैं, उनसे हम लोग बातचीत करेंगे और हम लोग एक निर्णय लेंगे और इस पर हम लोग एक बड़े आंदोलन के लिए तैयार होने जा रहे हैं।
So more and more questions now emerging from top lawyers across the country, including Harish Salve. He's also spoken out against the in-house investigation that has been ordered by the Supreme Court, as well as the transfer of Justice Yashwant Verma from the Delhi High Court to the Allahabad High Court. He was speaking to CNN News 18's Rahul Shivshankar. This is what he had to say.
On a day full of implications, really, for judicial transparency, Mr. Salve, your assessment of the response of the Supreme Court collegium in the first instance?
My response is, I'm afraid to say, very negative. And it's for a reason. The allegations, and I only call them allegations, I have no information beyond what I have read in the newspaper. So I caveat it. But if the allegations are true, and the fact that the Supreme Court has considered it necessary to act, then what should have been the response? And the response has established things which critics of the collegium system like me have always said, that this system doesn't work. Today, This is not a case where there are some internal complaints against the working of a judge, and in order to ensure that judicial independence and integrity is not compromised, you do an in-house inquiry. Today, this complaint is that, as per the newspapers, the fire brigade and the police went into the judge's home to rescue it from a fire and found large sums of cash. Now, if this is true, it's something which has happened in public. And I have 2 or 3 reasons for which I feel this collegium decision is deeply flawed. If this had been found, Rahul, in your house, if such a large money would have been found in your house, by now the ED would have been at your doorstep. If this money had been found at the house of the Home Secretary, Finance Secretary, Transport Secretary, would they have been transferred to another department? They would have been suspended and a disciplinary inquiry commenced. Perish the thought, if this had been found in the home of a cabinet minister or a state minister, what would have happened? People would have been paying for their blood. You would have been asking right now, why has he not been arrested? And if the government had said, we will do an in-house inquiry into the cabinet minister, the Supreme Court would have interfered on a PIL, constituted an SIT and a supervised investigation. Are those same standards to be applied to one of your own? I would say higher standards need to be applied to one of your own. So it's wrong at that level. It's wrong at a second level because this is not, I believe, an in-house inquiry has now been ordered.
Yeah.
This is not fit for an in-house inquiry. Third, why are you transferring this judge? If he is fit to discharge judicial functions, let him be in Delhi. And if he is unfit to discharge judicial functions pending this cloud, till the cloud is either removed or confirmed, is he fit for Allahabad High Court but not for Delhi High Court? What is Allahabad High Court? A dumping ground? So, and this notion that we are sending him to his parent High Court, he didn't come on a promotion to Delhi. Allahabad High Court is a co-equal institution and he was a judge of a co-equal institution. It is moving a judge from one court to the other. We are always told, this is not a punishment. It's just a convenient arrangement of dispensing justice.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Abu Dhabi and Jordan, the firing of the iftar cannon signaled the breaking of fast. A humanoid robot joins the police in eastern China, and Hong Kong's new panda cubs reunite with their mother ahead of their public debut. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1935, Persia was renamed as Iran. The new name was derived from the Persian word Iran, which meant the land of Aryans. It was adopted by Iran Shah to connect with the nation's ancient past. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.
وخير العمل وخير الثواب.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. A scandal has hit the Delhi High Court when a fire broke out at the residence of Justice Yashwant Verma on Tughlaq Road on the 14th of March. The Delhi Fire Service and police responded and successfully controlled the blaze. But during the cooling operations, a large amount of cash was allegedly discovered following the charges. An emergency meeting of the Supreme Court Collegium was held, which led to the transfer of Justice Yashwant Verma from the Delhi High Court back to his parent court, the Allahabad High Court. Now the Supreme Court has initiated an in-house probe seeking a report from the Delhi High Court Chief Justice. Further action will be taken by the Supreme Court Collegium after the report. Meanwhile, the president of the Allahabad High Court Bar Association has strongly objected to the Supreme Court Collegium's decision to transfer Justice Verma back to the Allahabad High Court, saying, and I quote, "We are not a trash bin." Now, this case, while it is a matter for investigation, has once again brought the issue of transparency in the judiciary back into the public limelight, raising questions over the internal checks of the collegium system. But to decode that further, I'm joined by a